So I'm going to struggle with the pronunciations of these names. So I'm going to just say I'm joined by Dr. Ray and Dr. Greg from Bioware. And thanks very much for taking some time to say hello to us, guys. First of all, congratulations on this. I'm going to jump in the shot. The Golden Joystick Award for Mass Effect 2. Congratulations.
Thanks very much. It's a big honor for us.
It's been a great year for you guys.
Yeah. Next one is even better.
Next one's even better. Well, I suppose let's talk about this year first of all. Obviously, Mass Effect 2 came out, stormed the charts. Everyone loved it. It's had plenty of expansions. Everyone seems to love them too. What's next for Mass Effect 2?
Oh, we're coming out on PS3 in the early new year, so we're very excited about that. And
Excellent.
It's the first iteration of Mass Effect franchise on PlayStation, so we're really excited to bring the game to especially our European fans. We're in Europe right now, so the PlayStation 3 is very big here in Europe. So they've had a chance to play it on 360 PC, but now they get to play it on PS3. So a lot of anticipation and excitement from the fans on that.
Will there be any changes, or is it just a straight port?
Well, I think it's so it's primarily a port. But one thing that's important is that obviously whenever we make it on build something for a new platform, we make sure it really reflects that. So obviously we tune in the controls, everything else really works in a very fine way. The other thing too is because we're going right into the second installment, we're doing kind of a story so far sort of module that brings you up to date and allows you to make some of the choices, so that actually you get a sense of what got you to the point at the start of the game, and you go from there. So there's a bit of unique content that actually is being built for this as well.
That'll be playable content, will it, or is it just story?
Content's for playable. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So aside from the Mass Effect 2, we've also had Dragon's Age. That's also been another huge success, and Dragon's Age 2 is on its way out. What do you think is going to be the main difference between the original Dragon's Age, which is a year ago, around about this week?
Yeah, almost a year between Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2.
Yeah, and what are going to be the main kind of selling points, shall we say, for Dragon Age 2?
Well, I guess we're trying to look at what the fans loved about Dragon Age Origins, and we're making sure that stuff is still there as a foundation element in Dragon Age 2. So things like the rich, mature, dark heroic fantasy world, it's kind of gritty and it's full of all kind of interesting factions and political groups. You have to figure out how to navigate the landscape to solve quests and kind of make bring the right outcomes to the world. So that stuff's in Dragon Age 2. It's a really interesting world to explore. It's dark, it's mature. It's gritty, bloody at times. You have to make some dark choices, and these choices have consequences. That's another thing the fans love from Dragon Age Origins, is that everything you did, where there was good, bad, or somewhere in between, a lot of shades of gray, there's always had interesting moral consequences to them, and really made you think about, wow, what do I have to do here? Because I might annoy this group, or this group my party members may not be into it. So you have to really reflect on that. And there's no perfect choice, but that's kind of what made the game interesting in some ways. Another element that the fans love was the tactics and the strategy and sort of the ability to choose the right abilities for your party and kind of complement one another and have them interact and kind of make some really interesting choices that made a difference in moment-to-moment gameplay. Dragon Age 2 has that as well. What we've done is add on a lot more intensity to the action, so it's an action RPG, Dragon Age 2, as much as anything, but it's got that depth and richness and tactics as well, and strategy and progression customization. But it's a very immediate kind of intense moment. You push a button, something awesome happens. You're swinging your sword, you're firing off spells, and you're controlling a party at the same time, but it's a very action-intense kind of combat. The graphics, the fidelity has been raised across the bar, so it's a lot more consistent. And there are moments that are really beautiful in Dragon Age Origins, and there are moments that weren't quite as beautiful. And so Dragon Age 2, we're trying to raise the bar consistently, so it's really high fidelity and beautiful characters, immersive, credible characters throughout, and the environments as well. And the other area that we're innovating quite a bit is the story. So you still have the choices and the consequences and cool, compelling companion characters, but you also have, we're calling it a frame narrative, where it's a decade-long story of the main hero or heroine, Hawk, and champion of Kirkwall. And we're trying to do that in chunks, where there's these chapters or acts, and they're like the heroic aspirational moments of this decade-long progression to become a champion. And then they're framed by narration after you complete the major event, kind of commenting and really personalizing and rewarding you for making some cool choices in that chapter that you just played through. So that's where the idea of framed narrative comes from. That allows us to tell a story that's longer, that has more sort of like long-term consequences to it. And it's a different approach to storytelling. We also have, because there's a main character protagonist, we have voiceover for the main character, we have a dialogue wheel, some tonal icons. It's kind of reminiscent of Mass Effect, but with some innovations built on what the Dragon Age team is adding to that. And the net effect is just, it's got a lot of stuff the fans love from Dragon Age Origins, but it's got a lot more as well.
The multiple storylines are gone already in the new one. Like in the first one, you could pick different origins. The first Dragon Age.
Oh yeah, so the origin stories, right.
Yeah.
Well, because you start with the defined character in Dragon Age 2, you can choose your class, you can choose if you're male or female, you can personalize appearance, things like that. And then a lot of that from that point on is it's more of a, you define your destiny as that character, as opposed to defining your origin from the beginning. It's just, it's a different approach to storytelling.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the difference between the frame narrative with a defined main character versus the open, undefined character that you define that through the origin stories in Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
Hence the name Origins.
Yeah.
So on the story side of it, it's something I've always found interesting is that computer games today have such strong stories and incredibly rich universes created around them, and that's something that Bioware has always been noted for. What happens with the story, all of the fiction that gets created along with one of these games? Are there ever plans to develop it further? I mean, not so much into like a film or something, but a series of comics or a series of novels or anything like that. Is that something that ever gets talked about in a serious way? I mean, primarily you're here to produce computer games, so.
Well, as a matter of fact, we actually, there are multiple novels for each of Mass Effect and Dragon Age. So I think Dragon Age is on 2, Mass is on 3. Is that right?
I think we're more on the way.
Yeah, we're more on the way, and the comics as well. You're absolutely right. Like I think
animated series, movies,
figurines,
physical products, figurines, all kinds of cool stuff actually.
Because I think
that's all in development or already released.
Yeah, I think one good use of some of that content that was created, for example, in Dragon Age, was also a pen and paper game made for. So we actually try and when we build the worlds, we try and make them very broad. So
there's comic book series for most Mass Effect and Dragon Age as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by making them broad, you actually have the opportunity to sort of like fit all kinds of things into them. And I think another thing too that's interesting with the game is we create like a long timeline, like literally hundreds of years, and then game events can like sort of span different sections. And so, Dragon Age Origins was the first one, but the Dragon Age 2 kind of spans half of it and extends to another one, and then we have ideas on future events for future games. Not as a specific trilogy or anything like that, like we did Mass Effect, but just, there's all these things that we built in, and like you said, like, you can actually explore them in other ways, in other pieces of media. Like the Dragon Age novels and Mass Effect novels, where I think they all both did a similar thing, which they started a little bit before, kind of led up to, and a little bit during and after. So it's a really fertile ground for us to pursue. And I think secondarily, you have all these people that are super talented creators working on the games. I mean, the lead writers of many of the games are the ones who actually wrote the novels, and so you have great consistency between them.
Or the comic books.
Yeah, the comics as well, exactly.
Partnering on movies and so on. Like these are the things that are actually, they're part of our franchise plan. So that's actually very much a business and strategic goal. Because we know the fans love being able to continue to explore different universes, both inside a game and outside the game. So we're really happy to be able to provide that.
So on the other side of that same coin, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Old Republic, and indeed back to the Knights of the Old Republic. You're taking on a very well-established franchise with Star Wars, a very well-established universe with its own canon, and it's all that, and a rabid fan base, shall we say, that will scream do murder if something is out of whack. What are the differences and the challenges in developing for such a loyal kind of fan base and universe already? I mean, do you have long discussions with LucasArts as to where you can go with the story and what you can change or what you may not change?
We can probably both take a cut of this one. So we kind of talk about licenses and new IPs. They're really on the spectrum, So you start with a new IP and you've iterated a number of times, it turns into a license. So when you look at something as amazing and storied and wonderful as Star Wars, it's been around for over 30 years. It's an honor for us to be able to partner with LucasArts on that franchise, and not just partner, but also help to build. Through Knights of the Old Republic, we actually helped build some of the canon that became part of the Star Wars timeline. So that was a huge honor for us to be able to do that. We picked a setting in partnership with LucasArts for the original Knights of the Republic that was what, 4,000 years before the movies, and it was a timeline that was really undefined except for some comic books, really cool comic books, Tales of the Jedi from Dark Horse, and we used those as inspiration, and then kind of wrote a brand new story arc that kind of like fit into that timeline when there's, hundreds and hundreds of Sith and Jedi all over the universe kind of at war, and thousands of them kind of all going at it. It's a cool period because it's a period of galactic strife and battle and epic change and conflict. That's the same setting basically a little bit later for Star Wars: The Old Republic. But for us, it's actually been a very natural partnership where we get to really evolve some of the story and kind of build new things in the universe while we're still celebrating reverentially, because we're huge fans of Star Wars ourselves, a lot of the things that make Star Wars great. And it's great to have the movies for inspiration, look for those iconic moments we could bring back and use those for inspiration to create, characters and story arcs and moments, these heroic aspirational moments or villainous aspirational moments where you get to be a Sith or Jedi in the same way, or you have a smuggler or a bounty hunter, and kind of these really cool moments from the movies are inspiration for us.
I think touching on the, how do you deal with the franchise or the license reference to the people and the fans themselves? How do you live up to the expectation? One key thing for us is that, we're true to the property. We work really hard to try and understand what it is. In many cases, like again, both in the case of Star Wars and the D&D stuff we've done in the past, we're huge fans. So we really do value it and take, we approach it with great reverence and care. Just like something you really care about. Because I think one of the ways you go down the wrong path on a franchise or license basis is you use it as a crutch or a shortcut. You can't do that. You have to treat it really well. And then secondarily, part of it's listen to the fans. I mean, we have a community site up on, Bioware, or it's actually SWTOR.com that has an enormous number, over 1 million.
I had a good look at it last night just before we came over, and I was fascinated. I saw the story of Exar Kun.
Yeah.
Who's somebody I remember from the New Jedi, when they set up the New
comics.
Jedi temple in Yavin 4. I was like, oh, Exar Kun, that's his story.
Yeah,
okay.
no, and so what's amazing is that we have all this stuff that's placed for people to talk, and we get feedback from them, and it's really making the fans a part of the process, but also being understanding what it is that drives people to Star Wars, and again, that's where LucasArts really comes in, is working with them they understand it better than anyone else, and so all these things kind of culminate together in what we think is going to be a pretty special experience it's both for Star Wars fans and just game playing fans. It's going to be a really unique experience.
Would you consider yourselves storytellers as much as games producers?
Us personally?
Oh, well, you personally and Bioware as well.
Bioware's story is an important part of how we deliver emotional intensity. So the real goal we're striving for is emotional engagement and intensity, and just kind of really make these games that make you feel something, like at a deep level, whether it's a sense of visceral fear in combat, or genuine affection for characters in your party, or a sense of awe and wonder at traveling to new landscapes and feel like you're the first person to see them, or a sense of pride and progression, and just feel like, badass, my character's really got some cool abilities. These are all emotional moments, and the story for us is one of the stronger ways to deliver that, with companion characters and choices that matter and consequences that come out of those choices. So Bioware is known for story because we see it as a really important vehicle to help deliver that emotional intensity and just really make players feel like they're part of an immersive world they don't want to leave.
Yeah, if I was going to make the choice between are we storytellers or game makers, it's clear. I think mentally I see us clearly as game makers, and story is it's one of the key things in our toolbox that we use. And so because we look at it holistically, I think if you focus too much on the storytelling aspects, you'll often, and we've seen this ourselves as we build games, like we've had to, you can compromise certain elements of your gameplay if you focus too much on the story, and vice versa. Yeah. So we look at it holistically as a balancing act where the storytelling is a key element, but it can't trump gameplay, as an example. Whereas there are folks out there that are like true storyteller game makers, and they focus on the story, and that's their choice. And so us, we like to look at the big picture. And like as Ray said, stories, vehicles, so exploration, so combat, so your character development.
It might come from what you interpret as story too. And Greg and I have this debate sometimes. It's kind of interesting, but we debate
about this.
We debate. Well,
right now we're
debate right in front of your audience. Yeah. What narrative is? Like what's story? What's narrative? Is there a narrative of the hero's journey, sort of moment to moment? Is there a narrative of combat, like a boxing match? Of I drew my right hook and it's like left punch, and I knocked him out. Like sweat was flying off his, it's like this, if you look at a combat sequence in slow motion, there's a story there in a way. It's a different kind of story. It's a different, it's arguable whether it's story even in the traditional sense, so we need a new word for it. I like to think of it as narrative combat. There's an explorer's narrative. If you look at a map, just imagine on an RPG or any game really, where you have different locations to go to. Suppose you have the emergent element of you can go to them in different order. And suppose you had a video made or a color map or something showing the order that people did the locations in. Every player would have potentially a different order of locations. It might be a finite number if there's, depending on the number of locations, but it could be pretty interesting to see, how different someone's experiences were from one location path journey to another. And that might really color their perceptions. For example, if the first area you went to was combat intensive in one player's journey, and in another player's journey, they went to a city first. There was a lot of intrigue and political machinations and story elements, or trading, or whatever you do in a city versus what you might do in a dungeon full of monsters. That might color their entire perception of the narrative, the main story arc from that point forward. To, oh my, I'm going to a new area now. Wow, is there anything here that's going to kill me? Or I have to go into this area kind of confidently, figuring out what's going on, trying to figure out the lay of the land, who's in charge. That kind of they really color your perceptions. And that's part of the joy of discovery of games. That's why the storytelling games actually it's more nuanced and interesting than just like dialogue or conversational elements. It's about who do you bring alongside you and what do they think of what you're doing. They're the mirror of your actions, the lens through which you see the world. What's the path? What's your explorer's journey? What areas do you go to first, second, third, and so on? What progression do you choose for your hero? Your heroic, aspirational journey. If you show the different abilities players gain at different times, that would be an interesting map to show side by side as well. There's a form of story in all these things, and I think they help to enrich the experience. And really, for me, that's what story is. And so, if you look at it in that sense, if you say story is the broadest possible definition, then I would say, maybe countering what Greg said, we are storytellers.
How about that?
But I would, the traditional definition, I would agree more with what Greg said, that we're game makers, because game making for us actually comprises what we mean by story, and narrative.
So I was going to agree with you, but now I take it back. but I don't really have an argument. I'm just going to be disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think it's true in the sense that we actually see the whole experience is the thing, and I think that's really the key thing for us is that whole view. Because I think one other way that we think of that in the context of quality. So we make something really, really high quality. You want every element to be at a certain bar, a certain level of quality. If any one element is below that, that really taints the experience. And so I think that's actually how we approach Bioware quality is the holistic view of all the pieces and relative values, how good are they and stuff. So.
Right, very quickly, we have time for one more question. The Old Republic is Star Wars MMO. What is going to set this apart from other MMOs?
I think Star Wars: The Old Republic. Have you had a chance to play it yet, or you haven't?
I played earlier this year, much earlier this year, an early
So we're doing an intensive play, which is actually probably a really good way to illustrate it. In that, here at this event, folks are going to play for 5 hours, and they get a good taste of the first.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there for that tomorrow.
So that's just a small taste, really, of gives you a start to understanding it. But
because I think the difference is, in a sense, is actually subtle. Because when you play it, as a person who played MMOs, you're probably very familiar with I know how all the controls work, and I'm back home in a familiar territory. But then as you start interacting with the game, I think the biggest thing that'll stand out will be the story piece. But what'll be weird at first is you think, it's just the regular story you see in a regular MMO. Then you forget that, actually, wait, they don't actually have this. And then you can play another one and go, wait, where's the guy telling me, giving me a context for what I'm doing, giving me something personal that makes me feel special. There's this element of story that actually permeates the game that is subtle when you play it, but when you see when it's missing when you try something else. And finally, the fact that at any time you can have this intense story experience, you can also share it. So I was an RPG player. I've always had these dreams. Wow, I'm playing this game. I wonder if it'd be great if someone else would come in and we could share this quest together. Well, that's what this game is all about. And the ability to do that is really the differentiator, and the fact that it really does capture the essence of Bioware storytelling and allows you to share with other people. But on top of that, it has all the stuff that MMO has, and at any time you can jump in your ship, you can go do get your crew to go build stuff for you, and with the crew skills, all these different things. It really strikes you actually, and it's one of those things that suddenly catches up with you, and you realize I can't actually remember. It's hard to believe I'm playing now.
Until before you know it, you're stuck deep in the middle of the Star Wars universe.
Yes.
I mean, there is
Fingers
that,
crossed.
as a differentiation point. Well, it is Star Wars, and it's really iconic Star Wars.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's not the first Star Wars MMO.
Well, I guess we LucasArts can talk about prior games that are set in the Star Wars setting. We're focusing on
It's the first Bioware Star Wars.
It's the first one.
So I mean, what we're striving to bring to bear is the iconic, heroic, aspirational fantasy that people love, like Star Wars. Everyone gets to be a hero.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is doing cool shit all the time. You know, it's like, and you get to do a lot of different activities too, like all the.
Where you swore on camera.
Oh.
I'll go bleed.
It's a small one, but you know the activities are fun.
It's meaningful.
It's got the best of breed features of other MMOs, but it's got story, choice, and consequence. Set in Star Wars, delivered at Bioware quality. And
Well, actually, that point, just to tease that one a little even more, the fact there's choice. Like, you know, when you go to do a quest, you don't actually have to do the quest. We almost always provide you some sort of option to change it, do something different, to actually not do it until the person goes, I decided not to do this. And then something else happens.
And there's no save game. So, you know, it's interesting, you think about a choice that has a consequence that actually
You can't just try it again.
You can't just try it
Well, you
again.
can't, we gotta play it all over.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd have to start a new character, I guess, and even that would be different because if you have other players with you in your multiplayer conversations and your story arc, well, that wouldn't be the same unless they're exactly there at the same time. But the fact that there's no save game, you know, we talk about that as a difference too. That there's choices, and this is a different kind of choice. It's a choice you have to live with, you know, and they're all going to be fun choices. So there's no worries there, but they're all going to be different. So every player's experience, even if they're playing through the same character class personal journey, they're going to have a very different experience from their friends because of those choices.
Yeah, big thing.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
We look forward to seeing Star Wars MMO tomorrow. I'll be getting stuck into it.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell you all about it later, okay? That's great. Thanks very much.